Following my father's funeral, a period when discussions about inheritance were common, my brother-in-law, who is married to my sister Sharon, surprisingly claimed that all of my father's assets, including $7 million in cash and stocks, should solely belong to Sharon, the eldest child. This proposal brought joy to my sister and her husband, yet the lawyer quickly clarified that such a decision wasn't theirs to make. My name is Paul Walker, a 44-year-old sales professional with a wife and 3 kids. My father was a significant shareholder in a company and remained actively involved until his later years. Sharon, my elder sister, has often challenged our parents with her erratic behavior and, even in her middle age, lacks a stable job, choosing to live life on her own terms. Our relationship has been distant, primarily due to my disapproval of her actions. When Sharon turned 52, she unexpectedly introduced us to Russell Brand, a younger, handsome man with a laid-back attitude, and announced their engagement. Despite her financial instability, Sharon didn't hesitate to ask for a substantial sum from our father to cover wedding expenses, quickly depleting it and then audaciously requesting more. This behavior greatly distressed our father, given her presumptuous attitude towards inheritance. The news of our father's sudden heart attack and subsequent passing deeply affected me. Amidst receiving condolences from friends and relatives, I stepped up to assist my overwhelmed mother with the funeral preparations, while Sharon remained absent, engrossed in her own life. The day following the funeral, as my mother and I were beginning to find solace, a lawyer arrived to discuss my father's will. Unaware of its contents, Sharon and her husband audaciously interrupted, asserting that Sharon was entitled to all of my father's stocks and the $7 million inheritance, leaving my mother and me speechless at their boldness. In a moment filled with anticipation, my brother-in-law jubilantly proclaimed, "We've made it, Sharon. This inheritance sets us for life," his fist cutting through the air in triumph. The lawyer, taken aback by such presumption, intervened with a caution, capturing my sister's fierce gaze. He looked at them both squarely and revealed, "Sharon, you have no claim to the inheritance." My sister and her husband, visibly shocked, countered with disbelief, arguing that as the eldest daughter, Sharon was naturally entitled to everything. It was evident my brother-in-law had placed all his bets on this inheritance, convinced it would all go to my sister. Their confusion only deepened when the lawyer, with a gentler tone, dropped a bombshell. "Were you unaware that Sharon is not Mr. Paul's biological child?" Instantly, the color drained from my sister's face as she turned to our mother, her eyes wide with panic. Our mother, her expression a mix of emotions, faced a moment of truth I had long been aware of. My sister was a half-sibling, a fact that had been hidden from her. Confronting our mother, Sharon's voice trembled. "What does this mean?" To which our mother confessed, "Sharon, you come from my first marriage." The revelation stunned Sharon, who had always playfully claimed the title of the favored child. Her husband, trying to grasp at straws, argued that Sharon, being legally adopted, must still be entitled to a share of the inheritance. "That's what I assumed," Sharon supported, yet our mother's next words shattered that belief. There had been no formal adoption. In disbelief, Sharon protested, "But I'm the eldest daughter." Dad even acknowledged it. Her frustration now turned towards me accusingly. "You're going to let him take everything?" she challenged. Annoyed by her sense of entitlement, I couldn't help but respond, pointing out her continual reliance on our father's generosity despite it. As they insisted on the fairness of a father's support for his daughter, I was reminded of how my sister used his financial aid not for growth, but to bail herself out of recurring predicaments. It was then that Mrs. Paul, our mother, who had been silent, suggested, "Perhaps it's time Sharon reviewed the will as well." Caught off guard, Sharon panicked, "The will? I don't know anything about that." It was her lack of attention and engagement that had led to this moment. Our father had intended for us to discuss the will together when he drafted it, but Sharon, uninterested at the time, chose leisure over family matters. Highlighting the omission from the will, I saw my brother-in-law's frustration flare as he sharply questioned Sharon. "What were you thinking?" This mattered. The realization dawned that they had to confront the contents of my father's will. The lawyer clarified that the inheritance was designated for me and my mother, citing my father's hesitance to adopt Sharon due to her indifferent attitude towards me, her spending habits, and her overall conduct. Sharon was visibly shaken by the news that she had no legal claim to any inheritance. At this revelation, my brother-in-law's temper escalated, accusingly pointing out to Sharon, "You promised there was wealth." His attitude became threatening, shocking my mother and Sharon, though I wasn't surprised given his history of greed and opportunistic behavior. He coldly told Sharon not to return until she had secured some money, revealing his true motives and leaving everyone in dismay as he abruptly left the scene. Feeling betrayed and cornered, Sharon turned her frustration towards us, particularly our mother, lamenting, "Why wasn't I legally adopted? It's unfair that the inheritance bypasses me." Her outburst was raw and filled with a sense of betrayal, causing a stir that the lawyer witnessed with a seasoned calm. When Sharon accused me of being the undeserved beneficiary simply because I was our father's biological son, her words cut deep. But I realized that my existence was not the root of her exclusion. It was her actions and choices. Before the situation could escalate further, the lawyer intervened, warning that her behavior could lead to legal consequences, a reminder that made Sharon pause, likely recalling her previous misdemeanors. As time passed, the inheritance process concluded smoothly, thanks in part to the lawyer's expertise, leaving no room for further dispute from Sharon or her husband. Despite their initial discontent, my mother decided to give Sharon some financial assistance, a gesture I chose not to comment on. Their subsequent disappearance with the funds only underscored their true intentions, leaving a bitter impression among our relatives who were privy to the saga. Seeking to uplift our spirits, I organized a family meal with my mother, wife, and daughter. The outing, suggested by my wife, brought a noticeable change in my mother's demeanor, brightened by the presence of her granddaughter, offering a moment of joy amidst the ongoing family turmoil. During a moment of calm, I suggested to my mom, "How about moving in with us?" But I was quick to add, knowing the unpredictability tied to my sister, Sharon, she might drop by, seeking help, especially financial. We should be cautious not to enable her too much. My mom's hesitation was palpable. Sharon, despite everything, was her daughter, and the prospect of potentially inviting conflict held her back. I left the offer open for her to ponder as we approached our ancestral home, only to be greeted by an unexpected sight. Lights on in what should have been an empty house. Suspecting Sharon might have returned, I proposed, "Let's have a quick coffee inside," as we got out of the car. Suddenly, a car charged towards us, missing us by a whisker, but in protecting my wife and responding to my daughter's alarmed cry, I ended up in a flower bed, slightly injured by the fleeting touch of the car, which eventually crashed into the garage entrance. My wife and daughter rushed to my aid, while my mother, frozen with shock, watched from the doorway. The incident led to my hospitalization overnight, and I later found out that Russell Brand, my brother-in-law, was behind the wheel, claiming a mix-up between the accelerator and the brake, a story I found hard to swallow. When my mother and sister visited me in the hospital, Sharon's response to my condition was chilling, hinting at her disappointment in my resilience, almost as if she had hoped for a more beneficial outcome for herself. I couldn't resist commenting on her apparent wish for my demise to claim the inheritance, noting her unease as she diverted her gaze. I then revealed that our mother intended to relinquish her inheritance in my favor, making any drastic actions from their side futile. My sister's shock was evident. The concept of foregoing a rightful inheritance seemed alien to her. I further explained that, in preparation and following our father's prudent approach, I had already drafted a will, ensuring my family's future, thus redirecting the inheritance away from our mother directly to them. My sister's plea for a share from the speculated $7 million, under the guise of familial generosity, only highlighted her desperation and misunderstanding of our family's values and intentions. In the aftermath of firmly rejecting my sister Sharon's demand for a substantial share of the inheritance, the atmosphere in the hospital room shifted dramatically. Sharon's demeanor transformed, her face contorting into a visage of pure fury as she physically accosted me, her hands gripping my collar in desperation. "Give me half, I'm your sister," she demanded, her voice laced with a chilling blend of anger and desperation. It was a distressing sight, witnessing her descent into what appeared to be a state of irrationality, driven to the brink by her intense desire for the inheritance. Her actions, so starkly at odds with the values our father held dear, made me regard her with a deep sense of pity and disappointment. "Do you not realize how your greed would have disappointed Dad?" I questioned, hoping to ignite some sense of reason within her. Yet this only served to inflame her anger further, as she made a grab for my throat in a shocking escalation of violence. The situation took a dramatic turn when our mother's voice, tinged with alarm and authority, cut through the tension. Nurses quickly intervened, escorting a visibly shaken Sharon away from me. Despite the turmoil, it was evident that my mother's heart ached for Sharon, her biological daughter, even though Sharon had directed her vitriol towards her as well. "Where did I go wrong in raising her?" my mother lamented, a question heavy with sorrow and regret that echoed in the sterile hospital corridor. The emotional and physical toll of the incident was soon overshadowed by my mother's deteriorating health. As her condition worsened, my wife and I found ourselves more involved in her day-to-day care, a development that seemed to provoke Sharon's resentment. Her feelings of exclusion were palpable, especially as she confronted the reality of our increased presence in our mother's life. This tension reached a boiling point when Sharon, in an abrupt phone call, insisted that she and Russell would take over caring for our mother, effectively sidelining my wife and me. Her declaration was unexpected and filled with a certainty that brooked no argument. Despite my attempts to reason with her, to discuss what was best for our mother, Sharon remained unmoved, ending the call with a finality that left us stunned. Confirming this sudden shift with my wife, who had received a similar message, we were both left concerned for our mother's well-being, especially considering Sharon and Russell's lack of experience in caregiving and household management. Surprisingly, Russell claimed to have some caregiving experience, a small comfort given our mother's still manageable level of independence. Yet this reassurance was short-lived. Within a month, a grave medication error sent our mother to the hospital, her condition alarmingly frail. It was a mistake that was unlike her, known for her meticulousness, especially with her medication. As my wife remained by my mother's bedside, offering the support and love she needed, I ventured back to the family home. What greeted me was a scene of neglect, a bare refrigerator, a poignant reminder of my mother's once vibrant love for cooking, and the absence of the household help that had been a staple in our family's life. The disarray spoke volumes of the care or lack thereof that Sharon and Russell had promised, casting a long shadow over their capability to manage the responsibilities they had so confidently claimed they could handle. Discovering that a considerable sum of money had been withdrawn from my mother's bank account filled me with regret for ever placing trust in my sister. Despite the safety measures, with her bank card and PIN securely locked away, the funds meant for everyday expenses had nearly vanished, while thankfully, the inheritance remained safe in a separate deposit box. This breach of trust prompted me to collect necessary items for my mother's hospital stay, including her bank card, to address the financial anomaly. Upon discussing the situation with my mother, it became apparent she was oblivious to the mishandling of her bank card. Yet, when the conversation shifted to the medication mishap, a shadow of sorrow crossed her face as she admitted it was Russell, my brother-in-law, who had prepared it. The suggestion that Sharon should no longer be welcomed into the house seemed more urgent than ever. My mother's condition and the chaotic state of our home were alarming. "Mom, you need to stay with us," I insisted, envisioning a peaceful home for her recovery. Despite this, her health worsened, possibly exacerbated by stress, leading to her untimely demise. The somber task of arranging her funeral revealed a grim reality. The family home was stripped of its valuables, a testament to my sister and Russell's relentless greed. The emptiness of the house mirrored my feelings of shock and betrayal, fueling a resolve to seek justice for their egregious actions. The aftermath of my mother's funeral set the stage for a meeting with the lawyer, where my sister audaciously claimed her entitlement to our mother's inheritance. Her confidence wavered as the will was read, revealing her exclusion from any inheritance, a directive from our father reflecting his final wishes. Russell's outrage at this revelation only compounded the tension, his frustration manifesting in a destructive outburst. Amidst his tirade, I confronted him with a pressing question, one that hinted at a dark suspicion. "Russell, did you attempt to harm my mom?" The gravity of the situation hung in the air, marking a pivotal moment in our family's saga. As we awaited his response, the truth of their actions poised to come to light under the scrutiny of the law. As I squarely faced him, Russell returned my inquiry with a look of irritation. "I've done nothing wrong," he defensively claimed when questioned about the medication error. His annoyance was palpable, emphasizing their fixation on the inheritance rather than the well-being of our mother. Sharon, losing any semblance of calm, chimed in, outraged at the prospect of being left out of the inheritance. Her reaction betrayed her motives. It wasn't concern for our mother that drove her, but rather the hope of solving her financial woes with the inheritance. "Is it true that I'm getting nothing?" She demanded an explanation from the lawyer, her voice a mix of disbelief and desperation. The lawyer began to outline the specifics of the inheritance distribution, taking into account the funds Sharon had prematurely withdrawn and the value of the items she had sold. The end result left little to nothing for her, a revelation that left her visibly frustrated. I couldn't help but interject, highlighting that this outcome was the result of careful legal consultation. "That can't be all that's left," Sharon muttered, a clear indication of her disillusionment with the reality of her financial dependency on our parents, never having to face the struggles of earning a living. My disappointment in her turned to anger. "Mom thought you'd look after her, but instead, you just took her money and left her alone," I accused, unable to hide my disdain for her actions. Sharon retorted, demanding evidence of the expenses incurred for our mother's care. I challenged her to justify the spending, extending my hand for the receipts, knowing full well she had none. I don't have them," she stammered, her confidence waning. The lawyer underscored the importance of such documentation, leaving Sharon at a loss for words. Russell then tried to appeal to my sense of family, urging me to support Sharon despite everything. But my resolve was unshaken. Their desperation was evident, and Russell's admission that Sharon would have inherited everything if their plan had succeeded only added to my suspicion of their true intentions. "What do you mean by that?" I pressed, seeking clarity on his revealing comment, ready to uncover the extent of their schemes. As the tension in the room escalated, Russell inadvertently made a comment that shifted the atmosphere drastically, revealing their true intentions. "Because of this guy, things never go right. I was expecting a new car out of this deal, but now I'm stuck with just enough for some repairs," he lamented, not realizing the weight of his words. My sister, Sharon, attempted to intervene, perhaps to salvage the situation, but the damage was done. The lawyer, seizing the moment, underscored the gravity of Russell's admission. "That's a serious allegation, akin to fraud," she observed, barely concealing a smile as she eyed the couple. Her next revelation caught them off guard. "This meeting has been recorded, with your consent," she reminded, effectively trapping Russell in his own narrative. Realizing the depth of his blunder, Russell's confidence deflated. Seizing the moment, I informed him of my intentions to press charges for the accident. Russell's attempt to dismiss the threat as baseless was quickly undermined by his own words, now recorded evidence. The situation spiraled for them as Sharon, overwhelmed by the turn of events, berated Russell for his carelessness, despairing over their predicament. In the aftermath, Russell faced criminal charges, his prior misdeeds compounding the legal action against him, leading to his arrest. Sharon, implicated for her role, received a milder sentence due to her lesser involvement. Facing financial ruin, she reached out to relatives for support, only to be met with rejection, a consequence of her actions and their fallout. As for me, witnessing the unraveling of my sister and brother-in-law's schemes brought a complex mix of vindication and sorrow. The path they chose not only led to their downfall, but also strained familial bonds, leaving a lasting impact on all involved. I kept on working hard, choosing not to depend on any inheritance. Instead, I found comfort and a bit of joy in the dividends that came from my investments in stocks, considering it a small but satisfying reward for my efforts.